Ultimate Muscle, or as Japan calls it, Kinnikuman Nisei, is what happens when you take pro wrestling, turn the volume up to 11, add some anime flavor, and keep the flair of the early 2000s, and then ask, hey, what if the chosen one was actually a coward who'd rather take a nap? And somehow, this leads to a perfect storm to make the ultimate wrestling anime with the oddest main character, whose name is Kid Muscle, the spoiled lazy son of a legendary muscle king who somehow gets tasked with saving the earth. And if that wasn't surprising enough, he has to beat an intergalactic wrestling organization called the DMP, which literally stands for Destruction, Mayhem, and Pain. And if that's not the most 2000 Saturday morning cartoon naming scheme, I don't know what is, because clearly I'm missing something. But regardless, it's not exactly the kind of group you send a rookie against, but with no other options and the old guard slightly retiring due to age, they have no choice but to pass the torch to Kid Muscle. But here's the punchline. Our main character, our hero, doesn't even want the job. He is whiny, gross, and honestly, once again, he'd rather not fight, which low-key, kind of relatable in some aspects. But don't judge this book by its cover, because when his friends are in danger, he taps into something called the Ultimate Muscle, and suddenly, he becomes unstoppable. And that, my people, is one of the many reasons why this show is weirdly so great. It's equal parts slapstick, comedy, over-the-top wrestling hype, and surprisingly heartfelt story about legacy, teamwork, and what it actually means to be a hero. Because in Ultimate Muscle, you don't have to be perfect to save the day. You just need guts, friends, and maybe a couple strong butt-related finishing moves. So stick around, because this isn't just another anime about destiny. This is the one wrestling saga where a fart joke could save the world. This is the one more popular in America than in Japan. This is the one 4 kids actually got right. This is Ultimate Muscle, and I'm Remy, and I just want to know if anyone's checked on Ultimate Muscle, and if not, let's. Kinnikuman didn't start as the wrestling juggernaut it is today. It actually started as a high school joke. 2 teenagers, Yoshinori Nakai and Takashi Shimada, were sketching up Ultraman parodies in class. And you can definitely tell it was Ultraman from these head fins. Look at these head fins. That's an Ultraman nod if I've ever seen one. But regardless, they didn't know it yet, but these sketches, no, these doodles would evolve into one of Shonen's most influential series of all time. And they wrote this under the pen name Yude Tamago, which literally just means boiled egg. And you know what? I'm not gonna hold you. It is not the most impressive pen name you've ever heard. But at the same time, Dragon Ball was written by a guy that loves poot jokes. So you know what? If the shoe fits, wear it. Also, rip the goat. Just want to say that real fast. But in 1978, at just 16 years old, the duo sent in their work into Shueisha, the big dog behind Weekly Shonen Jump. And while they didn't win an award or get a deal, the editor did see something in their work and encouraged them to keep trying at it. And that encouragement led to a one-shot, which snowballed into full serialization by May of 1979. The story followed Suguru Kinniku, a clumsy superhero from planet Kinniku. And by clumsy, I mean he was more dangerous than the monsters that came to actually destroy the earth sometimes. So yeah, it was pretty bad, honestly. And it stayed that way for a while, because at first, the manga leaned hard into gag comedy, spoofing superheroes with absurd and sometimes ridiculous humor. But then came the 20th Chojin Olympics arc, and that, my friends, was the turning point. It was during that arc where Kinnikuman had to wrestle for his honor, and because of this, readers said, oh wait, yo, hold up, this is actually kinda hype. The jokes didn't go away, mind you, but the fights became deadly serious, and the series had transformed into a wrestling-driven battle manga. And that shift, well, it changed everything. Fans were hooked, sales exploded, and suddenly, Kinnikuman wasn't just a comedy anymore. It was a cultural phenomenon, to such an extent that they even launched a legendary toy line called Kinkishi, which were little eraser figures that kids went wild for. And surprisingly enough, they even made their way to the US, which would go on to later be rebranded as Muscle in the US. And with that popularity, it was only a matter of time before Toei Animation stepped in, producing the first anime adaptation from 1983 to 1986. And here's the kicker, Kinnikuman didn't just entertain, it pioneered shonen tropes, the insane tournament arcs. A lot of people like to call Dragon Ball Z the progenitor of tournament arcs, and while granted, DBZ made tournament arcs mad popular, you gotta go back just a little bit further and give respects to the OG. The rivals turn friend dynamics in a wrestling-based manga when the bad guy turns to a good guy, is that not just a heel face turn? And not to mention the big fight power-ups, all that stuff you see in Dragon Ball, Yu Yu Hakusho, and even My Hero Academia. Yeah, Kinnikuman was doing it all first. So if you've ever cheered for a hero who was kind of a screw up but found his way by the end of the series, you know where that came from now. You know the roots, and now you can appreciate it even more. And is that not cool? You wouldn't expect this from the series that has so many fart jokes in it. Like a lot of, wow, so many fart jokes. But behind all the fart jokes and suplexes is the duo known as Boiled Egg. And I want to talk a little bit more about them because they're so important to this series and eventually Ultimate Muscle. So let me break down their respective roles. You have Takashi, the writer, and you have Yoshinori, the artist. And interestingly enough, these guys have been friends since grade school. So technically, they've been drawing goofy comics together before they were even in high school. So they've been locked in for a minute. And by locked in, I mean with each other, not manga creation. There was a time where they wanted separate things. For example, Takashi was drawing comics while Yoshinori himself, he was still trying to be a baseball player. But fate has a funny sense of humor, and eventually, he gave up the dream of being a baseball player and decided to become one of the most beloved manga creators in all of Japan. So, you know, it's a hard trade-off, I guess, becoming super famous in manga or becoming a baseball player. You know, I feel like he made a good choice in my opinion, but maybe that's just me. But more about them. Takashi grew up to be the loud one, always reading and always joking, and eventually became the public face of the team, which wasn't the best thing because fans gave him kind of a weird nickname. It was the non-working half of the group, so I guess he was just the boiled and not the egg.
Oh, brother, this guy!
That's stupid. I'm gonna keep that in, but that is pretty. I don't know why I said that. Y'all deserve a better YouTuber. Anyway, which personally I think is kind of harsh because like the dude writes the manga. Like he's the words behind everything that happens. All the jokes and all the other silly stuff is all him. So like clearly he's working. Meanwhile, Yoshinori prefers the quiet life, rarely appearing in public, and most of the time letting his art speak for him, which is pretty cool. And also, fun fact, his son, Mitsuyoshi, is actually a professional MMA fighter and pro wrestler. So in a way, the family business is still body slams, which in all honesty is pretty cool. But back on topic, the duo's big break didn't happen till high school, where their manga, Kinnikuman, nearly won an award in 1978. And at the time, Shueisha's editors were so impressed, one traveled to Osaka to convince their parents to let them move to Tokyo. And so by 1979, the two teenagers were living in a tiny Tokyo apartment, serializing Kinnikuman for Weekly Shonen Jump, which is so cool, but also an immense amount of pressure. Imagine barely being out of high school and then suddenly be responsible for one of Shonen's biggest hits. But thankfully, it all worked out. But if it was me though, your boy right here, he would have crumbled underneath the pressure. I'm not built like that. I ain't doing that. Too much responsibility. I'm not that kind of dude. But yeah, once again, their series blew up, spawning in anime, toys, and even influencing future giant series like Dragon Ball and Yu Yu Hakusho. But then, Boiled Egg didn't stop there. During their run, they had spin-off series, Tatake of Ramen Man, which got its own anime, after Kinnikuman ended in 1987. But the duo himself wasn't done even when Kinnikuman was done. They tried other titles, like Here Comes Phantom Kid, Scrap Sandanyu, and Kickboxer Moru. But none of these new titles really hit the way Kinnikuman did, unfortunately. And sadly enough, these repeated failures will actually lead the duo to leave Weekly Shonen Jump in 1991, and the duo was quiet for a while. So in 1998, when they came back to the franchise that made them legends with Kinnikuman Nisei, the series that Americans would know as Ultimate Muscle, that this return, whether they knew it or not, set the stage for one of the strangest success stories in all of anime history. Japan respected it, but the US adopted it. But before we go to the kid, we gotta pay respects to the OGs. So here's where things get a bit wild. Before Ultimate Muscle was cracking jokes on 4Kids, there was the original Kinnikuman anime. And in Japan, this thing was a cultural juggernaut. The anime ran from 1983 all the way to 1986 with 137 episodes. And at first, like I keep saying, the roots of this was gag slash making jokes. And man, they were like all about the jokes. It was a parody of superheroes. And once again, you think Ultraman, but if Ultraman was an out of shape gag character who couldn't even keep his mask on straight. Also, side note, if their mask comes off, they receive the death penalty. Like, they just straight up die if their mask comes off. That's why Kid Muscle never showed his face, because he would die. Like, that blew my mind when I found that out, because I always thought it was like a thing they just didn't do for like plot reasons, and then eventually they would take the mask off and reveal that he was just a normal looking guy. But no, it was because he didn't want to die, which is understandable, but it's like, why is that a thing? It's so weird, but it's kind of funny, but it's so weird. Like, genuinely one of my favorite running gags of this franchise is that they'll die if their mask comes off. But yeah, back to the script. I just wanted to point that out because I thought it was kind of interesting / funny. Okay. But then halfway through the series, it pivots hard toward actual professional wrestling. And while that was great for the narrative and the series overall, when it comes to the animation, I can't say that shift was the best. Because back then, yeah, that animation definitely had a budget. Toei didn't have slap you in the face and tell you to pick it up money yet. So they made it work the best they could. But the exaggerated poses and ridiculous facial expressions became the show's charm, honestly. It was less about the fluid punches and more about how dramatically someone could point at their opponent before suplexing them into orbit with 2 frames of animation. Which, you know what? After watching a couple episodes, I kinda low-key get it. Obviously, it's not the most amazing thing in the world just because of the time, but it's honestly not that bad. Like, granted, I don't think I could recommend this to a lot of people, but if you appreciate older animation and just seeing the medium in its earlier days, I think this is a fun watch. If we ignore certain elements, because some of these elements are definitely dated. We'll get to that eventually. And the cast of this show, oh man, it was something, and it was stacked. You had Terry Man, Robin Mask, Wars Man, and the breakout star, Ramen Man, who, as I mentioned earlier, even got his own spinoff. But regardless of this show's popularity, it never officially got an English localization. So for a lot of English / Western fans, Ultimate Muscle is the beginning and the end of the Ultimate Muscle IP, and Kinnikuman is just a thing that doesn't exist to them because they never knew about it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not I've been tapped into this since 2010. I've been down here in the trenches with the rest of us fans. Y'all, I didn't know about it. I'm not gonna pretend like I was some forerunner in knowing how popular and how amazing this series was. So, I was with y'all guys. I just knew Ultimate Muscle, and when Ultimate Muscle ended, that was the end of the show. That's where I stopped, because I didn't care enough to dive deeper in. But because of this video, I learned a lot of cool stuff about it. Like, this might be one of my longest videos. I don't know yet, because the way I record these are kind of weird. But this might be my longest video ever, and it's about Ultimate Muscle of all things. Like, so weird. But honestly, I'm really cool with that, because Ultimate Muscle is way more interesting than I thought it was before researching Kinnikuman, because, like, there's so much lore and context to this franchise that I just would have never known. And another thing I would have never known was how popular certain aspects of Kinnikuman was over here without it exactly being Kinnikuman. Earlier in the video, I brought up the toy line called Kinkishi, which was really popular in Japan, but when it was brought to America, it was rebranded into Muscle. Millions of unusually small creatures lurking everywhere, which super weird name, but apparently it was an 80s playground craze, or so I've been researching. Obviously, I wasn't around in the 80s if you couldn't tell. This is the part where I say something young and modern slang sounding like 6'7", or Ultimate Muscle is chopped. Slang, dog. I don't know. God deserve a better YouTuber than this. I don't know. Whatever, man. Continuing. And it's a shame because even though most kids had no idea where these little figures come from and that it's actually an anime about sweaty masked wrestlers drop kicking each other into submission, regardless of that fact, it was still a really cool toy for a lot of people. But here's where things come full circle, because in 2024, Kinnikuman actually got a brand new anime reboot called Perfect Origins Arc on Netflix, which sounds really hype if you want to get into the franchise. The only problem is, it assumes you know the source material already, which I don't understand why they would assume that. So for newcomers, it's like walking into season 5 of a show and being told, don't worry, you'll figure it out. And spoilers, most people don't figure it out, which is honestly a shame and adds a barrier of entry into getting into the franchise. So with that out of the way, prerequisites done and dusted, let's talk about the ultimate kid now. If you're gonna sell a wrestling anime to a kid in the early 2000s, you need 2 things: wild characters and even wilder backstories. And well, Ultimate Muscle, it had both. Front and center is Kid Muscle, aka Mintaro Kinniku. He's lazy, cowardly, and kind of a pervert, so basically everything you don't want from a hero. But when his friends are in real danger, he flips a switch and becomes this powerhouse in the ring. Think Clark Kent if Clark Kent was too lazy to get off the couch until someone really needed saving. And then you have Kid Muscle. Backing him up is Meat, the tiny trainer who looks harmless but knows way more about wrestling than most of the so-called heroes in this show. And Meat's an OG. He's been around since the original Kinnikuman days, but in this one, he feels more like a grumpy uncle making sure the kids don't blow up the family legacy, or I guess fart on it or something, in this case. And of course, any good shonen is only as good as its rivals, and this show has a lot of rivals. For example, you have Terry Kenyon, son of Terry Man, who takes wrestling as serious as a kid in college takes his GPA. Because as we all know, every kid in college takes their GPA super duper serious. That's for sure. They don't get into anime and have nights where they watch Gundam Seed instead of studying for a test and realize they hate Gundam Seed now because they failed the test, and then eventually just have so much random useless anime knowledge that they don't make space for actual knowledge related to the degree, and then eventually use that random anime knowledge to make a YouTube channel a couple years later. Definitely not me. That, you know, I'm not talking about myself at all. Anyway, back to Terry. He's disciplined, sharp, and constantly reminding everyone that he's carrying on his father's legacy. Then there's the GOAT, Kevin Mass, the edgy bad boy son of Robin Mass. At first, he's aligned with the DMP, but eventually he flips sides, classic anime rival stuff, friends, enemies, frenemies, and he was just so cool to me, dog. Like, for some reason, this 19-year-old who's 7'2", why is he wrestling? He should be in the league. What? He's 7'2"? God, that's a monster, bro. He's even cooler now. Kevin Mass was so cool. He was the edgy character for me. And if you've been on this channel for a while, you know I like two things when it comes to anime characters in the early 2000s. You're edgy for no reason, and you have a cloak for no reason. And Kevin Mass hit that edgy for no reason clause for me, and it was just like, okay, you got this whole aesthetic. I'm rocking what you do. You just beating up people. That's amazing. You still should have been in the league. 7'2" is ridiculous. Why you, brother? You in the wrong professional sport, brother. LeBron needs you for one last season. Get out, bro. What are you doing here, man? Man, Kevin Mass is just so unnecessarily cool. But there wasn't just cool characters in Ultimate Muscle. In all honesty, what makes this show more iconic are the weirdos. For example, you have Wally Tuskett, the giant walrus man. Why is he that way? Yo, is that Dick Van? Is that Dick Van Dyke? I didn't have a transition. That's what I Dick Van Dyke. I don't know. I'm so bad. And our man Dick is a gazelle-themed wrestler whose main power seems to be losing every important match. But, you know, he never abandons his friends. And, you know, that's pretty dope, but man, that guy should stop being in this anime because he just could not win to save anybody's life. And then we have Roxanne. She's Kid Muscle's love interest, who spends most of the show asking herself, am I really falling for this guy? And well, spoiler, yes she is. But Ultimate Muscle wasn't just about the new generation. It thrived because it tried to directly link back to the legends of the original Kinnikuman. You had OG characters like King Muscle, who's now kind of washed up, but he's there. And in all honesty, now that I rewatched this, I understand why OG fans in Japan definitely didn't like this, because they made this man look washed up as all get out. He was a slob. And don't get me wrong, eventually they do his character justice, but it's just that initial appearance is rough, man. Like, I get not liking this off rip. But then you have Terry, man, who shows up, you know, the American legend, who's a dad now, but also his son is trying to be his carbon copy, which is kind of weird. Then you have Robin Mass, whose son is now a bad guy, which kind of weird, but also, who cares, because he's cool. And then you have Ramen Man, who's just like never changing, because clearly if you're popular enough, you can survive a reboot. And besides the obvious popular characters, there were even some other popular characters making cameos that maybe shouldn't have. Looking at you, Brocken Jr., because you show up and it's just like, wow, they brought this guy back. Of all people, him, this one. And you can Google him if you want to see some really interesting stuff. I can't show you the interesting stuff here because I'll get demonetized. But he was aligned to certain people that have bad choices and historically have been bad people. So here's a cool image of him, but something's covered up with this convenient smiley face because you don't want to see what's underneath it because it is not another smiley face. So yeah, but on a positive note, he gets one more redesign, and this one's pretty solid. It's just like a military uniform with no logos or brand association. We'll say brand association. So yeah, his most recent redesign, pretty solid, and we should just stop there. Stop pushing that envelope, guys. Just stop. And while not everyone makes a cameo in the anime, in the video games, which I'll talk more about later, there's a ton of cameos. So even if they're actually technically retired, they still come back. And honestly, that's the weird mix that makes this work. It's the mixture of nostalgia bait of the classic heroes and the fresh chaos of the new ones. So on some levels, it was mostly for kids who had no clue about Kinnikuman, so they could still have fun watching the show, even if that meant watching a walrus man and a gazelle dude do wrestling moves. And that was a secret mix. And honestly, it should have worked. You gave older fans winks and nods so they could see what their favorite characters are doing continuously in the storyline. And then you had the next generation / newer characters for the newer generation of of viewers watching it for the first time. And on paper, that should have worked. But it didn't, because, well, the Japanese audience wasn't the biggest fan of this story. So let me actually talk about the story now. So the story goes like this. Years after King Muscle and the original Muscle League beat every villain in sight, Earth was finally at peace. But peace in anime is basically a countdown timer, unfortunately. And surely enough, a new group of villains show up called the DMP, Destruction, Mayhem, and Pain, which oddly enough kind of sounds like an Xbox Live clan name in 2003. But in this world, they're actually a terrifyingly strong intergalactic wrestling organization dead set on conquering the Earth. And normally you would expect the superheroes from the last series to step up and fight the villains, but the catch is, they're too old to keep fighting now. So the Muscle League dusts off the whole superhero training school and tells their kids/students, alright guys, time to earn your tuition. So they get to work. And then enters Kid Muscle, son of King Muscle, who is, let's be so for real right now, he might be kind of the worst candidate to save the planet. He's lazy, he's whiny, he'd rather eat than fight. But then when the pressure's on, he'll tap into the power of Ultimate Muscle and obviously becomes a monster in the ring. But until then, he's kind of the worst sometimes. But in its own unique way, that's part of the charm of this show. This show's divided into two parts. One, him being a clown, and two, him locking in. And honestly, him locking in are some of the more fun parts of this show. The clown aspects are really cool also, but who doesn't love a character when they lock in? When the goofy character stops smiling, that's always some of the coolest moments in anime. But back to the plot. This story unfolds through a series of arcs. First up, the battles with the DMP, where Kid Muscle and his new teammates struggle to survive against Kevin Mask, son of Robin Mask. And like stated earlier, even though Kevin starts off on the villain's side, he realizes the bad guys are not very chill, which I don't know why he didn't register that off rip, but you know, regardless, we got to the good ending eventually with Kevin. So he does a heel turn into a face turn, which is honestly a pretty classic wrestling story. And then comes the Trojan Olympics, a tournament arc so over the top, it makes Dragon Ball's tournaments look like a casual weekend sparring. And I mean Dragon Ball, not Dragon Ball Z or Super. I am specifically talking about Dragon Ball before somebody gets on me about that. In this arc, it feels like every new villain and hero gets a chance to shine in their own right. And even Kid Muscle gets to prove he's more than just his father's sloppy successor. And in the manga, because there's a manga obviously, yo, they get dark, which is cool because obviously you love a manga that's always darker than the anime, but they kind of get dark. And the arc they get dark in is called the Demon Seed arc, which surprisingly enough dives into psychological trauma and truly nasty opponents, which is like, huh. This was about gags and farts, and now we're dealing with trauma, which is kind of different. And sadly enough, this arc never made it into an anime. And obviously, we never got the 4Kids version of this because trauma is a bit much for Saturday morning cartoons, apparently. And probably for the best, because 4Kids would have scrubbed everything kind of dark off of that arc anyway. But regardless, as interesting as that sounds, the real underlying plot of this new spin-off is the new generations versus the old legends, aka the YNs versus the old heads. Which when you look at it from that angle, is kind of funny and interesting. Every fight isn't just about beating your opponent, it's about proving that you can live up to your parents, your mentors, and the insane expectation of being the next in line. And because of that, honestly, this series always kind of felt like it was shonen wrestling cranked up to 11, if you ignore the gag aspects. But if you don't, that's valid too. And you think all this is kind of crazy, just wait till you hear what the US version did, because once this landed in America, man, they started moving mad different. So when Ultimate Muscle hit the US, it really wasn't Ultimate Muscle anymore. It was the 4Kid version of Ultimate Muscle. And if you know anything about 4Kids, you already know that means censorship, and censorship. So when the anime aired on Foxbox, later 4Kids TV in the early 2000s, it means it had to play by Saturday morning cartoon rules. Therefore, a ton of changes got slapped onto the show to make it safe for kids. First, the name. Obviously, American kids couldn't understand Japanese names, so our main character became Kid Muscle. And I personally don't understand this change, but Terry the Kid got renamed to Terry Kenyon, which, why? But okay. Another weird one is Seiuchin got turned into Wally Tuscan, which actually in hindsight, I get changing his name. That's a weird name for an American audience, but Wally Tuscan is just so on the nose. But nevertheless, a lot of these new changes felt like the localization team sat down and asked, how do we make this sound like an after-school dodgeball team? But the changes went deeper than just the name. Some characters' accents, backstories were swapped around like they were trading cards. For example, Checkmate. He became British for whatever reason. Buffalo Man became Russian for, once again, whatever reason. And there are a couple more like this. And not to talk about the visual elements, but there were definitely visual elements changed. Kanji's gone. Forehead emblems gone. Well, except for Kid Muscles, obviously you gotta keep the main character's kanji. But everyone else is just gone for whatever reason. And obviously, if there's any traces of blood, scrubbed out. And obviously, anything gross got replaced with slapstick. There was this one scene where Kid Muscle, I think, used poop as a weapon and a plot device, which, you know what, in America, we got rid of that and it became a stink bug, which, you know what? I'm okay with that because I don't care for poop jokes. That's just gross. But that's just me. If you like poop jokes, I guess I can't defend that. I'm sorry. That's just weird. But the biggest change came in the tone shift. In the Japanese version of Ultimate Muscle, it balanced comedy with drama, but in 4Kids, they were heavy-handed into the American-style gag jokes and dad puns. Even in serious moments, you'd have an inner monologue making a joke or downplaying the situation all the time in the anime. And one of the last biggest changes they made was the soundtrack. New opening, new credits, erase any Japanese text, and replace any form of Japanese attention grabbers. Which sounds kind of bad, because up to this point, it just sounds like a traditional 4Kids anime edit situation. But actually, all the edits, censorship, and everything they did to this show worked out for the best. For example, have you heard the theme song for Ultimate Muscle? That's like, what? Oh, that's so good. That's such a good theme song.
Get a body slam, the human race.
Ultimate Muscle, dun dun dun. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna do that right here, but you get what I'm saying. Bang your opening. And not to mention, it was so popular over here because of these edits and the changes they did. We got an original ending because the anime in Japan was not doing good in the slightest. But over here, 4Kids and Toei Animation teamed up to give us a completely new ending to this show, which is like, what? Imagine being so influential as a dub. You convinced Toei Animation to give you something original and new, and specifically for your weird edits. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. But yeah, all that to say, the version most kids in the West remember wasn't the real Ultimate Muscle. It was the 4Kids remix. And the wild part is, the 4Kids changes are the reason why people still really remember it over here at all. Because the Japanese version wasn't great. Clearly it wasn't. But what we had here, the 4Kids version we had, somehow is the better version. And as crazy as that is to say, 4Kids did something right. And it's really cool that I got to grow up seeing that at least one time for 4Kids. Even though 4Kids censorship has ruined a lot of anime, in their own unique way, 4Kids have left a page in the history of anime in America. And for once, this is a good page, but mostly because of that opening, because come on, dog, that opening is so good, dog. It's so good. Okay, so why did this work out so well in the West? Like I talked about, it was a 4Kids censorship changes and everything else that went into it. But another key factor of why this dub was so well received is because the US audience had zero context. Like I said earlier, the original 1980s anime never came over, so nobody knew about King Muscle or all the crazy stuff that the shonen manga had pioneered. We just thought this was original and it wasn't a sequel. To the American audience, it was just a standalone cartoon with goofy wrestlers and saving the world. And you know, which in hindsight is a bold way to try to introduce people to a franchise. Like, imagine trying to get someone into the MCU and you start them off on The Defenders from Netflix. Yeah, no movies. You start them off on the weird spin-off from Netflix that isn't even canon anymore, I'm pretty sure, because only Daredevil I think is still canon. But you get where I'm coming from? It'd be such a weird jumping off point to try to introduce someone to a franchise. Except in this case, it turns out your friend really liked The Defenders and became interested in it, and Netflix gave The Defenders one more episode because your friend really liked it. You get what I'm saying? It's weird, but for some reason, it worked in this case. So for once, 4Kids knew exactly what they were doing. Instead of trying to hide how ridiculous this story was, they doubled down on it. The jokes, the slapstick, the constant puns. It felt like a parody of wrestling rather than a serious battle anime. And then you throw on the crunchy rock soundtrack, tone down the blood, censor the gross stuff, and boom, Saturday morning cartoon gold. And to kids, it wasn't censored, it was just kind of funny. But then, back in Japan, things were way rougher because this series was hype. People were so excited for Ultimate Muscle because it was a return of a long-awaited classic franchise. So when it made the original heroes look lazy, selfish, or washed up, the fans weren't laughing. They were angry. So yes, I am just saying Ultimate Muscle was Boruto for... Ultimate Muscle is the Boruto. No Blue Vortex, it's just Boruto. Until this video, I never really understood why old fans didn't like Ultimate Muscle, but now that I put it in the perspective of it just being Boruto, I completely understand people not liking this, because I don't like Boruto. Point blank, I don't think Boruto's very good. Mostly because they spit on the groundwork laid by the last series. Naruto's a bad dad, they kill Ninetales, they make the aliens more important, a bunch of other spoilers I'm not finna get into. But I just don't like Boruto. And Blue Vortex actually kind of got me hyped for a second, because I'm like, okay, that's a cool plot twist of how we got to the start of Blue Vortex. But then it just kept doing stuff that I didn't like. And I'm tired of it. I'm so tired of Boruto just making Naruto seem like a bad franchise. And look, I might be the minority in this opinion. I just don't like it. In my opinion, if they ever made a One Piece 2 called Two Piece or something, and it was about Luffy's son, and Luffy's son was a Marine for whatever reason, I would hate it. I would genuinely hate it. But yeah, thankfully, unlike the anime in Japan, what people did actually like about Ultimate Muscle was the manga, which ran from 1998 to 2011. And oddly enough, wasn't ran in Weekly Shonen Jump, it was ran in Weekly Playboy. So it was darker, bloodier, and way more graphic than what aired on TV. Therefore, Japanese fans who followed the manga got a grittier story, only to see the anime strip all that down and become kid-friendly with gags. So there's a whole other layer to why the Japanese audience didn't like this, because you come from a darker storyline, more serious tones, more serious setting, and then you get what Ultimate Muscle was in Japan or even in America, and it's just like, oh, this is not the same thing I just read a couple weeks ago. And meanwhile, us Western kids, we had no idea what we were missing. We just saw walrus guys, fart jokes, and power bombs. So the result was Japanese disappointment in the West Saturday Morning Glory. And what added on to that glory was the English voice cast. Now here is where Ultimate Muscle really flexed in the West. The English voice cast for the dub came straight out of 4Kids' legendary New York talent pools, which means if you grew up with Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Sonic, or TMNT, this was ASMR because you had all your favorite voices in this one anime. You had Mark Thompson led the charge as Kid Muscle, goofy, whiny, yet somehow lovable. And don't get me wrong, because this is 4Kids, he also voiced other characters like Ramen Man. And to no surprise, Thompson became one of the era's most recognizable voices, by the way, and even later popping up as Casey Jones in 2003's TMNT. But of course, the voice talent doesn't stop there. You also have Mike Pollock, the voice secretly everybody knows. He played Meat, who was Kid Muscle's sarcastic trainer. But his real claim to fame was being the voice of Dr. Eggman and Sonic. You also have people like Greg Abbey, who by the way, has a sick voice. He was Yusei, Raphael, Tristan. Dude has an amazing voice. And in Ultimate Muscle, he was the voice of Terry. We also had Eric Stewart, who voiced Dick Van Dyke, and King Muscle himself, and even was the announcer Mac Metaphor. And yes, he was also Seto, Kaiba, Brock, and James from Pokemon. Like, dude, this voice cast was stacked, and if that wasn't enough, we have one more you cannot forget, an amazing voice actor. His voice is iconic. I'm glazing way too much for this, but still, the man deserves his flowers. I'm talking about Dan Green, the voice of Yugi, Yami, and Tim. Like, dude, his voice is so freaking cool, dog. And once again, there's even more really cool VAs in this dub. You have Christopher Collette, Ted Lewis, Lisa Ortiz, and Maddie Blomstein. So when I say this voice cast was stacked with 4Kids talent, I am not kidding. Because they weren't just voice actors, these were Saturday morning icons. They gave us the voices behind the dub of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, TMNT, Shaman King, and everything else you saw on 4Kids. You saw that heart and soul in this dub. So without them, it would have just been another weird wrestling anime, but with them, it became a crossover fever dream where Yu-Gi-Oh! Characters, Pokemon trainers, and Sonic villains all joined forces to scream about suplexes. And if that doesn't explain why the dub was such a hit with Western audience, I don't know what does. Okay, well that and like the WWE being super popular near the 2000s, but mostly I want to give credit to the VAs, and that's just me being weird, but I don't care. Let me give the VAs their flowers, guys, okay? Okay, now that's done, we can talk about some extra media. Now, Ultimate Muscle wasn't just an anime. It was a full-blown franchise with merch, video games, movies, toys, and even trading cards. Basically, if you could slap Kid Muscle's face on it, they would do it. So let's talk about the manga. It ran in two parts, one from 1998 to 2004, and then a continuation from 2004 to 2011, which ran in Weekly Playboy. And yes, it does have the same name as the Playboy magazine over here in the West, but technically it's a bit different. Oh, hey, hi, post-recording context guy here. The Japanese version of Playboy and the American version of Playboy are clearly not a one-for-one. Actually, I don't even know if the American version of Playboy is actually still... Let me look that up real fast. Oh, it is. Okay, I guess they came back recently this year. Random. Regardless, though, they're not the same thing. At least to my knowledge, we don't have Marvel comics in Playboys or something like that, or maybe like DC comics in Playboys. You get what I'm saying? Like, there are similarities, mostly because of the name, which, by the way, Hugh Hefner sued them for intellectual property infringement, but eventually they settled and even actually started working together at some point. So, I guess all is well that ends well, I guess. And that is the context I'm giving you at 3:30 a.m. So... yeah, I'm gonna go to bed after this edit. Okay, back to the script now. Bye! So if you were ever one of the people that read the Ultimate Muscle manga and wondered why it felt so different, well, there's your answer. They were allowed to publish some graphic stuff in Weekly Playboy, comparatively to whatever they could have published with Shonen Jump. But on the other hand, Viz Media obviously had to censor whatever we got back then because, once again, the people in charge were more sensitive to how graphic mangas were comparatively to now, where they're like, hey, you know what, nothing too crazy, just throw it out there. Who cares? Who cares anymore? And I personally appreciate them not caring. And now for the video games. You had Ultimate Muscle Legend versus New Generation for the GameCube in 2003, or YNs versus the old heads. And a follow-up game, Galactic Wrestling, featuring Ultimate Muscle, that landed on the PS2 in 2004. And even a GBA game, Ultimate Muscle, The Path of the Superhero. Like, Ultimate Muscle was literally trying to be on everything at the time. And not to mention, but to totally mention, there was also a toy line around Ultimate Muscle. But it didn't stop there, because it wouldn't be a 2000s anime in America without a TCG, called, very creatively, Ultimate Muscle Battle Card Game. They was really cooking with that name. And while myself, I've never played the card game, because honestly, I didn't know it existed till I started researching this video, it looks okay. Like, they use screenshots from the anime for some of the card art, which obviously isn't the best. But, you know, if you like it, I love it kind of situation when it comes to me in this card game. So Ultimate Muscle wasn't just an anime. It was trying to build something huge over here in America. And while I won't say it succeeded, I won't technically say it failed either. Because when Ultimate Muscle had its moment, it was worth investing all this into making this IP grow. So that's why I wouldn't call it a failure. It just wasn't the next Dragon Ball Z or Pokemon, which I'm sure every shareholder wanted for this new IP. So yeah, that's Ultimate Muscle in a nutshell. It's one of those shows that shouldn't have worked, but it did. Because when you step back and look at Ultimate Muscle as a whole, it feels like one of those rare moments where everything lined up just right. You had 4Kids, the company famous for turning rice balls into jelly donuts, actually getting it right. They took a franchise with roots stretching all the way back to the late 70s and early 80s. Something so niche, no one in America probably had ever heard of it at the time, and they gave it a second life. They didn't just dub it, they transformed it into an icon for kids in the 2000s. And that's not an accident. That's a gamble that somehow worked out. And that's the magic of Ultimate Muscle. It's a story about passing the torch from the previous generation to a new one. But in a weird way, it's also about us, the fans. Kids who grew up watching this ridiculous intergalactic wrestling matches with fart jokes suddenly found themselves tied into a legacy that started decades earlier in Japan. A classic old meets new situation. Respect for the past while clearing space for the future. And yeah, it was silly, it was wild, it was over the top. But it was also proof that an anime didn't need to be on the biggest platform, say a Toonami, or have $1 billion toy line like Pokemon to leave a mark. What it really needs is just a hit at the right time in the right way for the right kids. So when people look back at 4Kids and they mostly remember the mistakes, Ultimate Muscle has to stand out, because this is the one they got right. The one with the random spin-off from the 70s became a childhood icon for the 2000s. The one that showed us sometimes the weirdest leaps can create the best memories. And maybe that's the lesson of Ultimate Muscle. Because while legacy matters, torches always get passed. And every once in a while, maybe something goofy, loud, and full of heart can find a way to bridge a generation. And that itself is worth more respect than what Ultimate Muscle usually gets. So hey, I'm Remy. I promise you I did not expect this video to be this long for Ultimate Muscle, but regardless, I just want to say thanks for letting me check up on it, and like and subscribe and hype the video. I will see y'all in the next one. Y'all be easy later. Okay, So I just said it at the end of this video at the script part, but I did not expect this video to be this long. Ultimate Muscle, I was expecting to be like a light 29, maybe 32-minute video, but it's not that. There was a lot to this, surprisingly. Like, I promise you, I didn't think I was gonna find out about a certain character that was affiliated with certain groups when I started researching for this video, because I didn't know that. But I was like, oh, Ultimate Muscle was kind of wild back in the gap. And they got some other things I'm not gonna show in this, but you can clearly tell this is from the 80s and 70s because they were just doing stuff back then. And I even had to cut out a whole section for this, by the way. This script for this video is over 27 pages. I have never written a 27-page script. I had to cut out a whole section because I wasn't trying to make this an hour. But there's a lot to Ultimate Muscle, a lot to Kinnikuman in general. So if you want to know more about it, I say please find out more. There's a lot of cool stuff about this franchise. And if you don't like the gag stuff, completely understand it. But I think this is a really cool franchise. And if it came back again, I think it would be done better. Obviously, don't get me wrong. I like the 4Kids dub. Obviously, once again, this video is long. It's super long. But if it didn't come back, I would hope they would keep the original tone from the manga. But enough of me rambling. Once again, this video is long. I'm scared thinking about editing this. I hate editing. I don't hate editing, but I kind of hate editing. So, yeah, I'm going to leave here. Like and subscribe, hype the video, all the other fun stuff, guys. I will see you in the next one. Thank y'all for watching. If you get this far, I appreciate you so much. Bye.